Groundbreaker, standard bearer, passionate advocate for equal rights. I think the woman who brought genuine professionalism to women's sport, Martina Navratilova. Now, we haven't got long, so this is going to be a super fast one-set wonder. But we're going to get through a lot, and you're going to give brilliant answers, and there'll be time, I hope, for a few questions from the floor. First of all, when you were a teenager, did you make a conscious decision to do things differently, or did someone guide you in that?
Well, I used to come to the net even when I was little. I grew up on clay, but I liked to come to the net, hit volleys, and I would get beat. And finally, when I was 14, I won the Czech championship at 14 and under. And the federation came to my father and said, okay, we're going to take over now. And by the way, she needs to stay on the baseline because coming to the net's not going to work. And my father said, it's okay, we've been doing it this way, and this is how she likes to play, so thank you very much, and we'll keep doing that. So I stayed with my father and kept coming to the net. And it worked out pretty well, I think. So, you do things. I mean, I played the sport the way I wanted to play it. Not the way anybody else wanted me to play it. So I stuck with my principles, and even if it didn't work out, I had fun doing it. So which is why I came to the net, because it was a lot more fun at the net than on the baseline. And we learned how to volley today better, right? Yes, thank you.
Which is interesting as well, because it's a risk-taking approach, and you are clearly not averse to risk.
It's calculated risk. To give you an example, I played Zina Garrison in Eastbourne in the final. And I kept coming to the net. She passed me many, many times. And at the end, the press said, why did you keep coming to the net? She had so many great passing shots. I said, what was the score? I won 6-2, 6-3. They remembered the great shots. They forgot the ones that she missed. So she may hit one great one, but then she misses 3. Hey, I'm good there. Because you win a match maybe by 5 or 6 points. So you look for the openings, and so it was calculated risk. I didn't hit a ball really soft and say, okay, now you can hit it as hard as you want, and I'll come to the net. No, I came in on the right shots. So it's calculated risk. It's playing the percentages.
One of the biggest risks you took was to leave home, to go to America and to ask for political asylum. How tough a thing is that to do?
Well, when you're young and kind of naive, you think everything will work out, and it did work out, but I didn't know what the consequences would be, except I knew that I may never see my family again. So that was pretty hard. It was kind of strange. Normally when people immigrate, they come as a family. Maybe they don't speak the language, they don't know how to make money, but they're together. I knew how to make money, I spoke the language, but I was alone. And so I totally uprooted myself. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, no doubt. I didn't see my parents for 5 years. Didn't see my mom for 4 years, my dad and sister for 5 years. But I wanted to play tennis, and I was not going to be dictated by somebody that I don't even know whether they would give me the visa to go play tennis. So I knew I couldn't be as good as I wanted to be if I was under control of somebody else. And then, again, it goes back to playing, the way I wanted to play. And of course, I wanted to play when I wanted to play. And to get out of the country, you had to get a stamp before you could go to the embassy to get passport, to get a visa. So I left and followed my dream.
Did it mean that motivation for you was always stronger than it was for those around you? You had to succeed.
Well, I was already successful. I just needed to stay healthy to not get into trouble when I defected. But the motivation came from within. It was never stifled. I think that was perhaps the only good thing about growing up in a communist country, is that women athletes were just as valued as men athletes. You were not discouraged to be athletic, to be active. And same from my parents. The only time my mom was trying to hold me back was when in kindergarten I was beating this boy in sprints, and I was 5 years old, and I was bragging, and she said, no, you're not supposed to beat him, he's a boy. You need to let him win once in a while. And that's the only time she ever held me back, really. So I eased up a little bit, but I just didn't beat him by as much. But I still couldn't bring myself to lose on purpose, because you know what? My father didn't lose to me on purpose. He wanted me to beat him fair and straight. So I finally beat him when I was 14 years old. So anyway, so I was never discouraged from being an athlete and reaching for whatever I wanted to reach for, because I was a girl or because you're just not supposed to be that ambitious or that competitive.
And
but
you
I was
feel very strongly about that sport can showcase women being allowed to be that, being allowed to be competitive or indeed ambitious.
You know, it's, again, what's the alternative? For women, it's almost a put down when they say she's so competitive. It's almost a put down. For men, it's a plus. For a woman, it's like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be that competitive. But as an athlete, it kind of gives you that confidence to be competitive. And I was competitive with myself. I was competitive when nobody was looking. You know, hitting snowballs against a tree to see if I could hit it 3 times in a row, or see how many times I can skip the rock across the river. You know, nobody was there. I was riding my bicycle around the garden to see how fast I could go and timing myself. I had a stopwatch since I was 9 years old. I was timing myself around the garden on a bicycle.
Do you still do that, Martina? Do you still have a stopwatch? Do you time yourself?
I do. I do. I just need goals. I need goals, whether they're little or big. Whether, you know, my goal is to run for 30 minutes. I want to run for 30 minutes, not 29, not 31 either. Just 30, whatever it is. You know, the other day, yesterday actually, I came here from Paris. I had to take Eurostar, and I'm like, I wanted to do an hour on the bike, but I'm like, I'm really pushing it. I didn't want to miss the train because I really want to do 60 minutes. So I just did 55. So I had to cut it short and just made my train, but I didn't want to stress.
Did you run?
So, you know, you pick your battles.
Make up the 5 minutes on the running and getting up those stairs and all that.
I didn't worry about it. But I mean, you set your goals, and it's just easier to be able to measure yourself and you know, again, competitive with myself.
In theory, sports should be entirely objective. It should be all about results and times. But as we know, it's not, because of sponsorship deals and things. How much, when you are a high-profile athlete, how much do you worry about whether people like you or not?
Well, since I came out in '81, I wasn't worried that much. Because that certainly was not a positive as far as fans are concerned, nor as far as Madison Avenue getting endorsements was concerned. But I knew I could still play tennis. So I wanted people to like me, but I wasn't going to pretend I'm something else. So, you know, it was what it was. I just wanted them to enjoy my tennis, really. And I never thought that much about what people think. So anyway. Yeah, you just do what you do.
Can I ask you about longevity? Because you won your last Grand Slam title at the US Open in the mixed doubles when you were 49. To be able to still be that good, that fit, that healthy, that motivated, to nearly your 50th birthday, and you'd still do it now if you could, wouldn't you? How do you keep that career so long?
Because
and so successful?
I love the sport, and I felt I was still learning, and I had to evolve with the sport as the technique changed completely, the footwork changed completely, from the wooden rackets to the metal rackets now with the strings, and the way I hit the ball now is very different from how I used to play. Because I evolved. I was never afraid to try new things, because you can always go back to how you were doing before if that doesn't work out. And I love the sport. I was still challenged, still learning, and I'm still learning, watching others and then experimenting. And I was playing because I knew I could still play better. You know, when I quit in '94, I was 38 years old, and then I didn't play for 5 years, and then I thought I could still play doubles. So I started playing at 43. My dad says, "Oh, don't do it. You're gonna, you know, ruin your legacy." And I'm like, "Oh, I just want to play tennis." I won 3 more Grand Slam titles, which is not bad for somebody in their 40s. And I had fun. And every year I can still play better than I'm playing right now. I knew I couldn't play as well as I did when I was 30, but I could still play better than I'm playing right now. So I played for 6 more years, chasing my best, whatever that was.
We've got time for a few questions from the floor, so just stick your hand in the air and we'll get a microphone to you straight away. This is Nick, who I played golf with yesterday. Hello.
Hi, Claire. Thank you for the volley lesson this morning, Martina. I really appreciate it. If there was something you could do and reach back to the teenage Martina, is there anything that you would say to her? It's obviously worked out pretty well, but is there anything you would say to the teenage Martina?
Absolutely. Get a coach. Yeah, because when I left my country, my dad was my coach, basically. And so from age of 19 to 25, I didn't have a coach. I lived around with different places, but I didn't have a coach. And it didn't occur to me to get a coach. Chris Everett, her father was her coach, but she lived in Fort Lauderdale. So when she came home, you know, her dad would help her out. I couldn't go back to the Czech Republic. I couldn't even really talk to my dad on the phone. That was complicated back then. And so I did it on my own. Finally, at 26, I started working out and saying, okay, my time's running out. And I started training really hard, but then I needed help with my technique and my tactics. And I started working with Dr. Renee Richards, kind of by accident during the US Open in '81. And that's when I started rewriting the record books, because I had help. You can't coach yourself. You know, everybody needs a coach, even Roger Federer, even Andy Murray.
Andy Murray does need a coach right now. If he called you, would you say yes?
Well, I think he's still working with, I forget his name now.
Jamie?
Yeah, Jamie Delgado, yeah. So he's got a coach. He's not all by himself. And even Roger, when he didn't have like a big name coach, he still had some, you know, Severin Luthi.
But if he rang you, are you prepared to be screamed at?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think I would tolerate screaming, but no. I mean, it would be hard to say no to that, wouldn't it? But I would get a coach. You cannot coach yourself. You can't watch yourself, and it's good to also change coaches, because there's not one person that knows it all. You know, they may say the same thing differently, and it's like a little light goes on. When I was at the end of my career, I was trying to pronate, because I grew up with a slice, and I was trying to pronate. And Billie Jean King was working with me for 5 years. I was trying to pronate. I just didn't feel it. Whatever she was telling me didn't make sense. And I retired. And then like half a year later, I'm playing with a good friend of mine who used to be on the tour. And I told her, I can't pronate. She says, well, just think about hitting the outside of the singles post, you know, the net post. I'm like, oh, a little light went off. And I figured out how to pronate after I retired. But it went, you know, so she said the same thing, just a little differently. So there's not one person that knows it all, and there's always somebody that brings something new to the table. So don't be afraid to experiment.
Just down here, yeah.
You are an incredible example, I think also outside of sports. I have a question. So I think it's really hard work to become number one. Mm-hmm. But once you have become number one, and you have proven that you could become number one, what kept you going to stay number one for such a long time, continuing to work hard?
Yeah, same thing. I wanted to, well, winning is a drug. It's very addictive. But I wanted to be a better tennis player. I wanted to be the best that I can be, whatever that is. You know, I always said my goal was to be number one, win Wimbledon, and be number one at the end of the year. I was good enough that I got there. The person that, in tennis, you can measure very exactly. You know, were they number 43 in the world, 143, or number one? So there's no BS there. You can't BS your way to the top. You have to earn it. I was good enough to be number one. If the only thing that I was good enough for was number 10, then that's my limit. But if the other 9 people weren't alive, I would be number one. But that would not make me a better tennis player.
No, make you a murderer.
So
at the back, last question.
And also in tennis, you're only as good as the opposition. So, you know, I wanted to be pushed, and I wanted to be as good as I could possibly be. But again, I love the sport itself. So it was, yes, I wanted to win, but most of all, I wanted to play the way I wanted to play and be the best.
I'm so sorry it has to be so quick with Martina, because she's brilliant, and you could listen for an hour. Hasn't she been fantastic? Martina Navratilova. Thank you.